Welcome to the Ernie Chambers Show.
Friends, enemies, and neutrals. That is the opening I used to give before every program I did when Channel 22 with Cox was on the air. But some politicians, mainly the mayor and Ben Gray and some of the wealthy people, did not like what I was saying. So rather than just shutting me down, they took the whole program and then the station off the air. The reason I would use that opening can be traced back to an expression. There was a program on the radio called I Cover the Waterfront. That is a term that means whatever needs to be looked at, whatever needs to be included in arriving at a conclusion, you will do it. Another way of saying it, if you're into sports, is I will cover all my bases. As you know, there are three bases: first, second, third, then home plate, which is not a base. Another way to say it is that I will dot every I and cross every T. So in the same way that all paths led to Rome, there are many ways to say the same thing. And what you're interested in is the message. If you're dealing with people who speak only French, don't speak Greek, because they'll think you're conjuring, working an evil spell on them. And you may be saying, mi amor, my love, or whatever that would mean. And they might think you're invoking the devil. So instead of wrapping their arms around you, they will shoot you. So you have to speak the language that people understand. For me, the only language that I speak fluently is English. At Creighton University, from which I graduated in 4 years with no problem, at the undergraduate level, they did not require me to attend classes. Maybe they felt fortunate that I wasn't in the class, because I would ask questions. I would answer questions that were posed, which the professor thought nobody would know the answer to. But I did a lot of reading. I've always done that. And I do it because I am against the notion of reinventing the wheel. I wrote a poem about that. This guy thought that somebody should reinvent the wheel. So he did reinvent the wheel. But the problem was that instead of a circular object, he produced a square. The concept of wheel, the essence of wheel, is rolling to get from one place to another through that rolling or that rotating action. It doesn't stay in one spot. Well, a square does. What that fellow realized was all that he had done was to present, and as he called it, reinventing the wheel, was a geometric shape. So the wheel, having been invented, having been used for all kinds of purposes, not just on a vehicle, but a gear by putting teeth on it. So when it turned, this gear turned this way from going right, the one next to it would turn left. So people who knew about mechanical things could make use of that concept of the wheel, a shape that moved in a circular or rotating manner. There is no point in trying to reinvent the wheel. I will not take a lot of time to discover for myself things that have been already discovered, described, and explained by people who know far more about those things than I would ever know, no matter how much studying I would do. It's not difficult for me to give credit to people who use their minds, who produce worthwhile ideas, works of art, music, mechanical devices, all of those things serve a worthwhile purpose if they're not misused. They can either be used to uplift humanity or used for the destruction of humanity. What we ought to strive for, in my opinion, is to uplift everybody. When I was in the legislature, I was the go-to person for farmers, ranchers, poor white people, even wealthy people. If they had a genuine issue, knew that if it fell within the province of the legislature and they could persuade me that it was worthwhile, it would benefit the people, I would work with wealthy people. I would work with lobbyists. If I'm on a path and I want to get from point A to point B, and there's a sidewalk that moves from point or stretches from point A to point B, and I'm walking on that sidewalk, do you think that because somebody who may be deemed an enemy of mine would get on that sidewalk, I would get off? No. I would say, if you're going my way, then I'll go with you. But I'm not going to change my direction just because of you. Now, as Black people, we have been demeaned, degraded, worse than any other group on the face of the earth. The Jews, during a concentrated period of time in Nazi Germany and surrounding countries controlled by the Nazis, such as Poland, went through what has become known as the Holocaust. 6 million human beings, 6 million human beings. That number is a 6, a comma, 3 zeros, comma, 3 more zeros, and those represent human beings, men, women, little boys, little girls, old people. And the Nazis were very cunning and extremely cruel. They were like mechanics or technicians. They had a book and everything was done by their book. Hitler got the notion that Jews were wicked, Untermenschen, subhuman. A lot of people don't realize that while they praise Martin Luther for standing up to the Catholic Church, nailing his theses on the doors of cathedrals to show that he was offended at the way the Catholic Church was operating, don't realize what a strong anti-Semite Martin Luther was. These white people, I don't care what nation they came from, have a way of elevating somebody they want others to worship. And to do so, they will either eliminate, lie about, or cover over the wicked things they did. Martin Luther wrote a tract, T-R-A-C-T, that was highly anti-Semitic. The nations that the Jews lived in or moved to became exploited by the Jews who did not produce wealth. They stole the wealth of others. They lived off other men's labors. These are the kind of attitudes and ideas propounded by Martin Luther. I'm bringing up things like that to show that history, so-called, is skimmed over. And it is, as a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, but unlike what Shakespeare said, signifying nothing, it signifies a whole lot. Generally, propaganda. Hitler had thought about becoming a Catholic priest. How many of you out there knew that Hitler directed huge sums of monetary aid to the Catholic Church and to the Lutheran Church, the two warring organized religions. Hitler gave much aid to both of them. And as a result, when he started his rapacious, murderous actions, neither the Catholic Church nor the Lutheran Church, the hierarchy, said anything. They were quiet because Hitler had purchased their silence. Those who talked about saving souls had sold out to Hitler. You need to read history. And because America's history is so bloodstained, so evil, full of rape, incest, murder, and human trafficking, these racists from the governor on down, including Donald Trump and the rest of them, are opposed to what has become known as critical race theory, CRT. To put it in a nutshell, it means that the history of America will be told as it really occurred. You will hear in some circles, in some history classes, about Lafayette, a French person, a Marquis, who fought on the side of the United States against Britain. But he didn't realize that America would become a slaveholding nation. And when he saw how vicious these white Americans were, presuming to own people as you would own a cow, a pig, or a chicken, he said, had he been aware of that, he never would have drawn his sword on behalf of America. These are the things that are not taught in the schools. It used to be called the 1619 Project because 1619 was the year that slaves, Black people, kidnapped in Africa, were brought against their will to this country. They were loaded into ships. There was no adequate space, no sanitary facilities. They were like spoons. One, the front of one was against the back of the other, and so forth, stacked up in rows below decks. You can imagine the odors. When the weather was hot outside, it was suffocating inside. If somebody died, the body was thrown overboard. So many people died during what was called that Middle Passage that sharks learned that that was a source of food, and they would follow these ships and consume the dead bodies of Africans. African people were not savages. Africa is not a single country. Africa is the name of a continent. And there were various, what white people call countries, but various tribal groupings. They had their own languages, their own customs, their particular skills. The Africans who came to this country knew about woodworking, they knew about sculpting, they knew about metalwork, agriculture, all of the things that it would take for a successful society. But when the movies began to be made and white people had to justify what they were doing to Black people, they created a mythology that savages in Africa were brought to this country and Christianized. And that's the idea that was taught in the schools, in the textbooks, and there are white people who have that attitude today. Some of them genuinely believe it because they were miseducated. We have a job to straighten that out to the extent that we can. I would give little homilies or lectures every day in the legislature, and nobody would try to shut me up because that would only be pouring gasoline on the fire. They would grit their teeth and just ride it out. But the thing that stayed in my mind is that there were people through public television who watched and listened, but even beyond that, every word spoken on the floor of the legislature during debate is recorded, then transcribed, and it becomes a permanent record of the legislative proceedings. So all of those lectures that I gave have been reduced to writing, and I can document everything that I said from sources that were generated by white people who are respected by other white people. Knowledge is power. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Not just speaking the truth, but the truth embodies action of a kind calculated to get you from point A to point B and accomplishing the things between those two destinations that you want to accomplish. But you must first have knowledge. Today, you could either take that to mean this period in history or this date. There is so much anger, hatred, division, lying, cheating, stealing, human trafficking in this country, which they are pleased to refer to as a Christian nation. It's where all those horrible things are happening. And the interesting thing is that the Christians, so-called, self-described, are at each other's throat. What means more to them than that religious designation is the political designation, a Democrat, Republican. I refer to the Republicans as Republicans. When that party line is given, all the other little flunkies fall in line and repeat it without understanding what it means. They're mouthing words. It's like Charlie McCarthy, the mannequin, the dummy, and Edgar Bergen, the ventriloquist. The mouth of Charlie McCarthy will move, but the words are Edgar Bergen's. There are a lot of people who a year ago, almost to this date, January 6th, who descended on the white people's capital of the white man's country, as they call it, and had those white people running for their lives, literally. And these white savages attacked police officers. They wanted to find Speaker Pelosi, and they would have killed her. They fashioned a noose with which they wanted to string up the vice president because he did not follow what Trump told them to try to get, and that was to prevent him from certifying the election. Nobody in his or her right mind would say that Trump won the election, but there are a lot of stupid, misguided white people out there and some cunning Black people. What white people don't realize is how cunning Black people have become by being around white people and studying them. There are Black people who are more Trumpish than Trump because of what they're getting. There are Black people in Omaha right now who are cheesing up to Mayor Stoddard, who will go along with what the Omaha Housing Authority is doing to Black people in order to get something for themselves or their organization. They are appointed leaders by white people. Charlie McCarthy speaks, but the words are Edgar Bergen's. These appointed so-called leaders so-called Negroes mouth the words that are put in those mouths by whatever white entity is paying them, bribing them, offering them things so they will say what the white people want. And when you start to see Black people more concerned about the attitude that white people have toward them than they themselves are for the welfare and uplift of their own people, that person among white people is known as a traitor. Traitor, one who betrays his or her own country or people. And another word that sounds the same way, but is spelled different, trader, traitor, is one who will offer one thing in exchange for another. And the traitor is also a traitor, betraying his own kind in exchange for something that benefits him or her. I've said it before, and I'll say it again and again. The traitors, traitors, of renown who have gone down in history, Europeans, Americans, and Jew. I'm not being anti-Semitic. Christians and others feel that Judas was the worst traitor of all time because he betrayed the Son of God, the one whom people call the Son of God. That made him arch traitor number one. Then in America, they had a fellow named Benedict Arnold, who's going to work with the British, but they didn't get him according to the way the law said that he had to be gotten. So although his name stands for traitor, they didn't actually convict him. Then the European, Quisling, who betrayed his country to the Nazis. So you have the European, the Jew, and the American. There is no Black person whose name means traitor, but there is a term of derision, put downish, that designates a Black person who betrays his or her own people. And that term is Uncle Tom. When somebody is an Uncle Tom, he may not have any nephews and nieces, but he's called that because he'll lick boots. How do you know he was licking the white person's boots? Because he's got shoe polish on his mouth. When the white man speaks, he jumps. They talked about bringing back that degrading, stereotypical thing called Song of the South with Uncle Remus and all the demeaning things about Black people. A young man who died before his time. He used to be a newscaster with Channel 7. His first name was Mike. His last name was Jones. And when they talked about bringing that back, he came up with an expression that I wish I had. You've heard something said and you say, I wish I had said that. Well, because people don't read, they won't know that Mike did this, came up with this, and Mike is gone, cannot protect what he created. But I give credit where credit is due. He said, not zippity-doo-dah, because that was a song, zippity-doo-dah. He said, zippity-doo, don't. That's what we need. People who will let the white man go this far and then stop him short. That's what we need right now. There are things going on that will endanger every human being on this planet. It is an entity I have dubbed Cyrus the Virus. And Cyrus is no respecter of persons, no matter what your religion is, your political persuasion, your gender, your sexual orientation, your wealth, your poverty. Cyrus the virus is an equal opportunity killer. And there are people who will play into Cyrus the virus's hands because of their religious view, their political persuasion, or they're just plain stupidity. Trump, as some people know, had said at first there was no real virus. It's like the flu. He even suggested that you could take cleaning compounds, and if they clean and sterilize surfaces, as this will do, then why not ingest it, and it'll kill the germs inside of you, just like it'll kill the germs on this table. And it will, because you, who are the host of the germ, will die. And maybe the germ will die, maybe it will go to another host. But that's how ignorant the white man that white people put in office was. He came down with the virus, but he went to this Walter Reed Army Hospital where they have the top doctors, the most advanced medical treatment, the highest level of knowledge, and he got that treatment. He could hardly breathe. He admitted before he knew what it told, they had to force oxygen into him. So he got that treatment. Then after he got the treatment, he came out and said, you can survive this thing without worrying about all this stuff that people are telling you. He can take care of his family. Rich people take care of theirs. Your governor, who wants to be a miniature Trump, will take care of his family, and you'll be out there dying. Cyrus will be killing you. Look at the workers that these white people say are essential, especially in the packing houses. And here's what they say, and their conduct gives them away if we had sense enough to see it and name it. The workers are performing work and services that are essential. That means they are of the essence. The essence is that without which a thing is not what it is. If a human being is a living soul, if you have a creature walking around without a soul, that's not a human being, because the essential, the essence of what makes somebody human is the soul, if you believe that way. So they're saying that the work done by these people is essential to the health of this society, but the workers themselves are expendable. Expendable means, well, if you have money and you spend it, it passes from your possession into somebody else's. If something is expendable, you can get rid of it and not feel any setback because of it. So the work these people, largely Latinos, many Black people, the work they do is essential to the interests of white people, but the workers themselves are expendable. They do not have the medical treatment that is warranted. They work under conditions that are inhumane. In America, right now, while I'm talking, and yet you have all these charitable groups, so-called, who will not look at those that I felt comprised my constituency, the 3 L's, the least, the last, and the lost. Those who had no friend, they did not have a voice. People referred to them or treated them as though they are, you remember how they used to call 7-Up the Uncola because it was transparent like water? These are the unpeople. You can get rid of them. They're in the way unless they're doing that hard, dirty, essential drudge work. that work they do is essential to the well-being of white people. But here's the question. Guess who will not come to dinner? We all know there are those of us who know better than to sell out. I look at somebody who's living by the skin of his or her teeth, poor, doesn't know where the next meal will come from. Satan said, when he was debating with God about Job, Satan was of the opinion that there was no human being on the earth who would do what God wanted him to do. And there's Job doing what he's supposed to do, the best he could to please this God. And then God called Satan's attention to him. God said, have you considered my servant Job? Well, there's Job minding his own business, and he becomes the stakes in a wager between God and Satan. And Satan said, well, I hadn't considered him, but now that you mention him, yeah, I'll take a shot at him. And God said, you can do anything you want to him, but don't touch him. So some servants came in and told Job that his sons were at this gathering and the roof caved in and killed all of his children. And his wife came to him and she said, Job, why don't you curse God and die? And Job said, you talk like the silly women, the silly women. He said, all my appointed time, I'll wait till my change comes. The Lord giveth, the Lord taketh, blessed be the name of the Lord. So Satan and God sat down for another conversation. God had a stogie, but he didn't have any matches. But at this point, God and Satan are getting along like reasonable people can. This is why when two nations are at war, at the diplomatic level, there is still communication back and forth. Why is that? How can that be? If these nations are dropping bombs on each other, shooting each other's people, how can there be talk at the diplomatic level? Because they're not going to be at war forever. And a day will come when the war will end. And while the diplomats are talking, they may reach an accord that will end the war. So here's God and Satan, the diplomats. So Satan said, oh, you need a match? And fire jumped out of his finger and he lit that cigar. God took that cigar out and blew some smoke rings. And he said, gloating, well, you took everything Job had, not only his children, but his cattle, and God itemized the things that Satan had done. And then Satan pronounced a principle that applies to this day. Yea, skin for skin, all that a man hath will he give for his life. And God said, look, Satan, do anything you want to Job, but don't take his life. So Satan was allowed to inflict Job with all of these suppurating, that is, these dripping sores. He itched everywhere. It was so bad that he would take shards of pottery. You break pottery in these pieces, and he'd scrape so he could scratch, and he'd scrape some of the worms off that were coming out of his flesh. So then 3 old hypocrites came and were talking to him. And they made comments like, if you hadn't done wrong, this wouldn't be happening to you. And others said similar things. And they kept going on and on like this. And Job told them, if you were situated as I'm situated, I would not say to you the things you're saying to me. I would comfort you. That didn't cut any ice with them. They continued. Then there was a young man among them. He said, I've sat here and I've listened to you. I'd always thought that in age there was wisdom, in gray hairs there was knowledge. But I've listened to you. And this is what Shakespeare said, but this is the idea that the young man got across. What you're saying is as a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. So he did not condemn and criticize Job in the way these other guys did. When God had had enough, felt Job had had enough, and Job stuck by his principle, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. All the days of my appointed time, I shall wait until my change comes. And the change did finally come. That's the way stories ended when they were written by people who had a message they wanted to get across. So all that people have will they give for their life. And there are people who will purchase everything they've got and even take their life if they don't deliver in the way they're supposed to. These are the Uncle Toms, the Aunt Jemimas, who will sell out the group for themselves. From the time that I was little, I was sympathetic toward those who were mistreated, who were ganged up on. And it stayed with me. I didn't like to see animals mistreated, any of that. So I let people know the 3 L's: the least, the lost, and I'm not going to tell you the other L. I told y'all 3 of them. I bet you can't guess what it was. At any rate, when I was in the legislature, I had given a promise. In this country, when you take an oath, they tell you to swear. But in the early days of this country, there were religious people who would not swear because they went by what the Bible said and took it literally. In the New Testament, Jesus said, and I'm paraphrasing, swear not by heaven because it's God's throne, swear not by earth because it's his footstool, swear not by Jerusalem, it's the city of the king, swear not by your own head because you can neither make a hair white nor black. So I say to you, swear not at all. Let your yea be yea and your nay be nay. Anything more than this cometh of evil. But you know what these Christians do? When you go in court or someplace, they make you put your hand on that Bible, which says swear not at all, and make you swear on that Bible that you're going to tell the truth. And I notice these things. Why should you be bound by something you say with your hand on that book when you're being compelled to do what the book said you should not do? That's how hypocritical or ignorant or both these white people are. Other white people don't read. But because there were people in the early days of this country who did take seriously some of the things that were in that book, they didn't take it seriously that you shouldn't own people, you shouldn't rape women and little girls. They didn't take that seriously. But when it came to swearing, no, I'm not going to swear. So anytime an oath had to be given, then it says swear, then in parentheses, or affirm. When a law enforcement officer or anybody else is giving an affidavit, which is a sworn statement, it says the affiant swears, parentheses, or affirms. The only purpose of an oath is to have a specific point in time where you acknowledge that you're giving this statement. And if you give it under these terms, where attention has been called to it and you're obligated to tell the truth and you don't tell the truth, you can be punished for perjury. When you violate a sworn statement, that's perjury. You lied under oath. So now all of these oaths will say swear or affirm. So when we went before the Chief Justice, those of us who were elected newly, the oath was administered. Do you swear or affirm? And you don't say out loud, you just say yes. Well, I affirm. I was not taking an oath, I was giving my word. And my word would bind me more than any oath taken to a God that the people swearing that oath to that supposed God did not believe in. That God, based on that God's book, said, if you believe me, keep my commandments. This people draweth nigh to me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. Why call ye me Lord, Lord, and do not the things that I say? But when I gave my word, it was without reservation, mental reservation. That means you say something with your mouth, but in your mind, you're denying that that's where it's going to be. So the form of the oath will be, whether you're swearing or affirming, you take this without mental reservation. You cannot later on say, well, I uttered those words, but I didn't mean it. No, the words that you uttered are the words that will bind you. When I came here today, I was going to talk about Cyrus the virus and lament how people are perishing for no good reason, because they're being misled, they're duped and deluded. So I'm not going to have time to go through that, but on the chance that the grim reaper may harvest me before I come back again, I'm going to read something that the World Herald did print, and it was printed November 18th of last year, 2021. They took as a headline, irresponsible anti-vax claims mislead Black Nebraskans. And some of you have heard me mention some of these things. And I'm just going to read it without deviating or explaining, because my time is almost up here. Frustration, thy name is COVID-19, AKA Cyrus the virus. Overwhelming is the frustration engendered by the flood of virus misinformation deluging the nation. Being Black, I am particularly perplexed and distressed by the volume of Black people among the deluded, COVID-denying, anti-vaxxer crowd. We are dying daily. During a weekly podcast called, quote, the Ernie Chambers Show, unquote, regardless of my topic, I preliminarily vent my frustration with Black people who spurn vaccination. Between two people, one of whom speaks only English and the other only Greek, there can be no meaningful oral communication. When in Rome, due to the deference paid to religion by many in the Black community, I resort to a scripture-based appeal, speaking their language, comprising a series of biblical verses. Jesus described you all when he warned, quote, they will not be persuaded, though one rose from the dead, Luke 16:31. Let them alone. They be blind leaders of the blind, and if the blind lead the blind, both shall fall in the ditch, Matthew 15:14. Nevertheless, deeming myself to be my brother's and my sister's keeper, I forge onward, echoing prophet Jeremiah's anguished lament. Oh, that my head were waters and mine eyes a fountain of tears, that I might weep day and night for my people, Jeremiah 9:1, followed by, quote, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, Hosea 4:16. A horse led to the water cannot be forced to drink, and a fool led to school cannot be forced to think. If the shoe fits, I am reduced to the role of a sower who can merely cast seeds and must rely on other forces to determine if they take root and grow. However, not all is gloom and doom on the COVID front. Heartening is it to witness the enthusiasm of young children eager to get their shot. Continuing the scriptural theme, they may be viewed as the fulfillment of Isaiah's prophet of hope. Quote, a little child shall lead them. Isaiah 11:16. May adults be led to heed them. Despite Ben Franklin's assertion that, quote, little strokes fell big oaks. If I had my druthers, I'd be dealing mighty strokes with the great axe of the legendary giant lumberjack Paul Bunyan against the twin oaks of COVID denial and anti-vaccination claptrap and trumpeting timber. That's how frustrated I am. I'm not just frustrated for Black people, but I cannot save the world. I cannot even save my brothers and sisters. I can't save anybody. All that I have to offer are words. If they're persuasive, then among the least, the last, and the lost, somebody may be listening. Somebody may hear. And maybe I'm wasting my time, but I don't have any way of knowing that. What I do operate on is the principle that in the same way, I will read something that another person said, and that person may be long dead, or it may be as recent as something in the newspaper, and I will take it and make it mine, shape it and mold it and use it, excuse me, to try to achieve a goal that I think is worthwhile. Somebody else may take my exact words, and because there is not the knee-jerk negative reaction to them that there is to me, my words will be carried, and something will be done with my words that I could never do myself speaking them. So I will never be silent. I will never give up. I will never be turned aside from it is that I believe. No threats, no promises of good things, no offering of good things will lead me away from what I believe I should do. And because gifts from most people go with strings attached, I don't accept things from people, not being ungrateful, not intending to insult, but I just don't accept things. I'm invited to go out to the University of Nebraska at Kearney, and they will pay what is called an honorarium. But for some things, I don't charge. So I told them, I will come, but you cannot pay me. I will not accept money for what I'm coming out there to say to the students and whoever else may be there. However, there is an operation in Omaha that I have a lot of respect for, namely Open Door Mission. So if you want to give them a contribution to further their work, I don't mind that being done. And I will do everything I can to persuade people to offer help that I'm unable to offer. And as Peter said, or one of those disciples, silver and gold have I none, but what I do have, give I unto thee. And then he made a religious appeal. I don't carry it that far. I might say silver and gold have I none, but such as I have, give I unto thee. May you come across somebody with silver and gold who is willing to share it with you. My time for this program has reached an end. So I'm going to sign off for this time. And if enough days pass to bring us to another Wednesday, that's when I usually do these programs, then I will do it again. But in the meantime, as the canary said, who discovered that the cage door was left open, I'm out of here.
Thank you for watching the Ernie Chambers Show. If you'd like to make suggestions, email us at ewcfacts@gmail.com. That's ewcfacts@gmail.com. This has been an EWC Communication production.